The question I want to think through this morning is, how does the resurrection of Jesus make us wise? This is Easter. Churches all throughout the globe are gathering to remember why we have this living hope, that Jesus faced death, but he came out alive, and that's something to be celebrated. And yet everyone is reflecting on its significance. What changed? So much changed. But we don't always think in terms of the wisdom tradition within the Bible, that actually the resurrection opens up new ways of understanding so that if we understand the resurrection and read the scriptures in light of it, we understand God, we understand ourselves, our world, the Bible, all of these things better. And so the wisdom tradition in the Bible, there's often an invitation: come and learn and think and have understanding. You may have high intelligence, good test scores, but not really know how to make good choices. You may be great at a certain few things, but your life is filled with struggle. The wisdom tradition talks about having that mature understanding where you understand how to live so that your life is productive, fruitful, good, leaves a good impression. And Psalm 49 stands in that tradition. The first four verses are that invitation to all people everywhere: come and learn and listen and receive wisdom. And the particular ingredients of this psalm is what makes it relevant for today. Part of the problem of life is death is mysterious, and yet it's assured. And we don't understand it. So how do we live in light of it? And we make all sorts of poor choices, including how we think about money, what we fear. And those are the themes that come up in this passage. And so as we look at Psalm 49, trying to gain wisdom, and doing this on Easter Sunday, where we're doing this in the light of the resurrection of Jesus, looking towards the question, how can the resurrection of Jesus make us wise? I'm going to ask three questions for you to think of as you reflect on your own life. First, where are you going? Secondly, who can you count on? And third, what are you attaining? So I think those three questions will help move us towards wisdom. So first, where are you going? And that, of course, is the very imagery of the wisdom traditions. Life is a journey. What are you learning along the way? What choices are you making? What paths are you taking? So verse 13, we're being warned about the foolish. And it refers to the path of those who have foolish confidence. They're firm in what they believe that they know, but they're wrong. And there's a path that they're on, and the warning is you don't want to walk down that path. And so what is the nature of the foolish confidence that's being highlighted in this psalm? And it's a confidence in fame and fortune. The accent more being on the fortune piece, wealth, but you can see through the passage, it's about achievement, it's about status. And so verse 6, for example, speaks of those who trust in their wealth and boast of the abundance of their riches. That's the source of foolish confidence. They have a trust in wealth that, in light of what the psalm opens up, is insufficient for life. And there's a desire to boast in their abundance. There's a sense in which anyone wanting wisdom looks to the models of who's successful, who's achieving. And in most places, the standards are you prospering financially? Is your reputation growing? Is your brand expanding? And so it's natural for us to say, how do you live well in the world? To look to the rich and famous. Even though often behind the scenes, there's always stories that are not being publicly portrayed. But that's the natural thing that we do. And Psalm 49 is challenging us to say, well, think about where you're going. Because despite what it looks like where they are in their path, it may not be a path of wisdom. Just wait and see how this plays out. So for example, how people define success, verse 13. This is the path of those who have foolish confidence, yet after them, people boast. So it's not just people boasting of their own achievements, but somehow we create a culture where we define success and then people inevitably buy in. And what happens is not only are the people boasting, but everyone is trying to get closer to it because they're trying to get on that path of success. but without thinking, without really looking, without putting it in the context of the whole of life. So anyone looking for wisdom needs to see more than just a superficial, more than just somebody's net worth or the article written to honor them, but what's really going on? How do you live well? An indication in Psalm 49 that something is wrong is the introduction of the concept of fear. So in verse 4, he says, I will solve my riddle. And that's what wisdom does. Things are sort of complicated. And what he's claiming is people are not putting the pieces together. There are things like death, there's things like wealth, there's things like people, all of these things. But when we put them together, it doesn't add up in this way. And so his riddle in verses 5 and 6, the question that seems at least part of what he's grappling with is, why should I fear in times of trouble when the iniquity of those who cheat me surrounds me, those who trust in their wealth and boast of the abundance of their riches? Because so many people get caught up thinking that's what life is about, just to go out and to seize all that you can and make the most of it. He says that's a fearful context. If people trust not in human beings, if they don't trust in God, if they don't trust in enduring principles like love and goodness, but they trust in things, that creates an ethical risk that at some point, if you're going to do whatever you need to get things, the situation could get scary. Now, why do we fear with prosperity? Well, the fear is not always the kind of fear that it seems he's getting at. One fear that we have when we live among prosperity in a city like New York, where there is so much wealth, where there is so much excellence, is the fear of missing out. And so rather than thinking critically, we just quickly buy the standards of success because we're afraid that if we wait too long to see if this is the right path, we won't get the compounding interest of jumping in early. And so that fear that we have of missing out causes us to uncritically just to go along with the path that Psalm 49 is saying, actually stop and be critical, don't just go. But that doesn't seem to be the kind of fear that the author of this psalm has. The fear seems to be concerned about oppression. His concern is in times of trouble, where a wisely lived life involves things like sacrifice and generosity. And if we're all buying into a game where it's every person for themselves, grab all that you can, that's not going to go well for some people. And so he uses the language here, those who cheat him surround him. Now you can't trust people because people aren't trusting one another. We're trusting in wealth. And it's a misplaced trust. It's a faulty understanding. And he's saying that actually makes me afraid when that's how we're defining success. So we may have the fear of missing out. We might also have the fear that people are going to lose sight of the important things that matter and run after what doesn't, in which case, inevitably, that won't go well. Another fear we have in that, if you have buy-in that that's just the way the world works, is the fear of failure. So to the degree that you may say, well, whether or not I trust in wealth the way everyone else does, if this is just what life is about, I'm just going to get on, do the best that I can. But because people are because people are pursuing things and therefore sacrificing obligations to people, one fear is that people will actively do harm to you. Another fear is they're just going to play by whatever rules they see fit, and therefore you can't win. If you want to live an upright life, as this psalm encourages us to, there will be times and seasons where things get corrupt enough that you're disadvantaged because you're going to be honest. And so there's that fear of failure. And then if you decide not to worry about that, then you take on the fear of the foolish, which is that you will lose. And the last fear that I'll mention just in the context of this psalm is a more existential fear. So I'm going to be talking a little bit now in the parts of the psalm that talk about death, because that's what highlights the foolishness of having a faulty hope. But there are many thinking people who have said that actually the most fundamental human fear is death, even though we are so busy trying to bury that. And therefore, the pursuit of wealth is not simply because we see something worth having, but we see something that is helping distract us from the thing that we know is inevitable. And yet we can't grasp, we can't comprehend, we can't make sense of it. So the hope is we could just ignore it and do the best that we can. So the riddle here has to do with people perceiving things wrong. And for him, it's a situation that raises concern, that raises fear, but there's a better way. And so, what's wrong with just a life of pursuing success and achievement? Well, it depends on what you think death is. And because death is mysterious, some are content just to say, it's just the end, that's it. So today, eat, drink, and be merry. For tomorrow, we die. Or today, just work hard and accomplish and achieve. Death is going to happen. There's nothing you can do, so just ignore it. But death is portrayed a little bit more darker, more mysteriously in this passage that then should challenge us to say, do we have the right priorities? So verse 14, like sheep, they are pointed for Sheol. So Sheol in the Hebrew language is kind of the concept of the underworld. So people die, they're buried, and then there's this mysterious, shadowy whatever that's just left untranslated. Like sheep, they are pointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd. So this is an interesting idea that gets introduced, that death, which we think of as impersonal, just as money is impersonal, it's just a thing, and yet we're trusting in money as if it were living. Death we're ignoring. But Psalm 49 is highlighting whatever path you're on, that's where you're being led to. And so we're all on different paths. Some are going over the mountains, and some are crossing the rocks, and some are walking along the river, and some get 10 years, some get 30 years, some get 80 years. But we're all going to the same place, and nobody's giving thought to, is that it? Is that the purpose of my life, just to get through it and then it's done? And death in verse 14 is personified. Death shall be their shepherd. And it's this interesting picture because we tend to think of ourselves as very independent. What path do I want to choose? I want to be with the people who define life this way. I want to be with the people who pursue that. Or I just want to be my own person, define my own path. And this is saying, but the shepherd calls, come. And at some point, no matter which way you've gone, you're going to arrive at the door of the one who calls you. Death is a shepherd. Death is not a good shepherd. Death does not care about you. Death has a very low bar. Just come and he will take whatever you have, even if the last thing you have is your life. Death is personified as a shepherd here. There's an old joke, why are there fences or gates around cemeteries? Because people are dying to get in. Okay, and the pun on that is, of course, dying to get in normally portrays an enthusiasm. And when it comes to a cemetery, people explicitly do not have that. You should not be wanting to go there. And yet the literal execution of that pun, but the way that you get there is the way that we'll all get there, is through death. Psalm 49 personifies death as a shepherd, saying, if you don't know who you're following, we can guarantee where you will end up, even though you may get there differently. And so it's in light of that the question about fame and fortune start to become whether or not that's really what we should prioritize in life. So verses 7 to 9, it says, truly no man can ransom another or give to God the price of his life. For the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice, that he should live on forever and never see the pit. There's no human being that should assume that they won't have to face death. But if there's no way to ransom one another, why accumulate wealth or achievements? If it won't help you avoid it, if it won't help anyone else avoid it, if it does nothing for you in terms of where you're going, why is that the thing you're trusting in? And so that's this weird paradigm. Death is our shepherd, but we don't trust death. We don't think about death. We try to ignore death. Wealth is just a thing, and yet we trust it, we hope in it, even though the reality is that hope will do nothing for that problem. There's no ransom. You can't buy your way out of it. You can't purchase God's favor. And so this question, where are you going? Psalm 49 says, well, it's true of everyone. We're going towards the grave. The question is that the last stop? Or is there a wise way of understanding the nature of things so along the way that you live very differently? So moving to the second question, who can you count on? And I'm using the language of who because death is personified as a shepherd, but death is not personal. and you're trusting in wealth or achievements, which are not persons, and therefore you're experiencing life in an impersonal way. You're just somebody who does, somebody who exists. And we know that, and yet life is offered to us. But when death is our shepherd and we're not listening to our shepherd, and when the things that we hope in don't really give life, they give us relief, they give us joy that makes it feel for a while that we have life. But at the end of the day, it's not really imparting life in us. The shift not to what do you trust in, is it fame or fortune, but who do you trust in? Is there a shepherd that can lead you in a way so that death does not become such a mysterious thing that your whole life is avoiding it, but that you have an understanding of it so then it doesn't throw you off? So if you were to pick a top 5 popular passage in the Bible, I'm sure in nearly every list, Psalm 23 would make the ranking. It's a good contrast to Psalm 49. Psalm 49, death is your shepherd. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. And I think the reason people like Psalm 23 so much is not because that's their firmest assertion, but because when you imagine what it looks like to follow the Lord, the picture is very different. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. Goodness will follow me all of the days of my life. That's what we long for. And the Bible is presenting, well, there is a shepherd who will lead you that way. But because this is the wisdom tradition, this is not escapist. It's getting us not to say, well, there's death, but you could avoid it. Don't hope in death, but hope in God and go the other way. This passage is saying, actually, death is so effective that God is not going to bring us away from it, but somehow what God is going to do needs to be more profound. So verses 8 and 9, for the ransom of life is costly and never could suffice that he should live on and never see the pit. Verse 10, even the wise die. Wisdom is not going to keep you from dying. Becoming a Christian is not going to keep you from dying. Accumulating wealth is not going to keep you from dying. So the picture here is we know that that's before us, but how are we walking through life? What is our path? And so Psalm 23, of all of the beautiful imagery, the verses that we tend to reflect on least, but play a very important role. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil because your rod and your staff comfort me. Those who follow the Lord face difficulties just as everyone does. We have dark and difficult times. The question is, in that darkness, are you utterly lost? And the writer of Psalm 23 says, well, if the Lord is my shepherd, even if I'm in the shadow of death itself, if the shadowy staff is before me, I'm going to take the next step and follow. And if I can't see, if I don't know where the shepherd is, well, his rod is a comfort. In what way? A rod is painful. When the sheep is not paying attention, the shepherd goes behind and pokes the sheep. And yet in Psalm 23, there's a sense in which if I'm in darkness and afraid of the wolf and afraid of the predator, the poking of the shepherd's staff may hurt for a moment, but I know that he's with me, and therefore I do not need to fear. And so the wisdom picture is not an escapist picture. It's a picture to say you are going to walk through life with its failings and difficulties and challenges. The question is, how will you live well? Are you on a path being shepherded by death, or is there another shepherd? And this is where I'm now introducing to you the Easter verse. Why on earth are we looking at Psalm 49 on Easter? Well, verse 15, for those who believe the Lord is the shepherd, but God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. And that's the Easter story of the shepherd, where Jesus says, how do you know a shepherd's worth following? You could read about this in John. There's lots of people that want to lead you. There are the religious leaders, there are the prophets, there's the gurus, there's the motivational speakers. All of these people have a vision for what your life can be, but where are they leading you? We're being shepherded on various paths, but to the same end. And Jesus says, but you know the good shepherd because he knows those who belong to him. He calls them by name and he comes and he invites them. And if need be, he will lay down his life for the sheep. That's the mark of the good shepherd. And so, who could ransom our soul from Sheol? Who has that power? Well, only the Lord. And the Christian message is that the Lord himself came to call us and to lead us and to go before us into death so that the power of death would not hold his people. The power of Sheol, the power of darkness would not be over his people, but that his people would be received, that the Good Shepherd would bring them not away from death, but through death. So on the other side, the Lord who is waiting for his people will receive them. And so in that sense, Christianity teaches us to understand what happened when Jesus died and was raised slightly differently. When you think of death personified, it just strips us of life, and anyone on the path has the power to do that along the way. We can take things from one another. The Bible presents God as the only being who can give life. And so you're tempted to see, as you read the gospel accounts, Jesus being crucified as death, the shepherd drawing Jesus and taking his life from him. But he says, I am actually the shepherd who is the one leading this. And this is not a picture of death taking life from me. This is a picture of life giving itself. And so that's the crucifixion of Jesus. Not that death would even defeat Jesus, but that life would give itself so that those who have no hope to ransom one another can be received by God. So Jesus literally gives his life so that those who cannot purchase life by any fame or achievement can receive it. And in receiving life from God, God will receive those who have his life. It's a very different picture. Some of you, particularly the younger among us, would have probably read The Hunger Games, popular book. And one of the early scenes that sets up the key character, Katniss Everdeen, she's the narrator. That's the word I couldn't grasp. She's the narrator telling her story about growing up in this completely corrupt society, where society is sectioned into these different groups. And because there was a rebellion years earlier, as a means of control and coercion, once a year they have this reaping where they take 2 kids from each of the different sections and they put them in these awful games where it's a fight to the death where one remains. And the story they tell is, and this really presents a hero for our society, but what Katniss, the narrator, says, no, this is just a way of keeping us afraid and keeping us against one another and keeping us from unifying against them. So we have this setup, and then the day of reaping comes, and Katniss shows up along with everybody else with great fear as they're going to draw the name of a boy and the name of a girl because the competitors are between 12 and 18. And to her horror, the name drawn is her 12-year-old sister, Primrose. And so as her sister, not understanding why this is her fate, has to sort of slowly walk forward, the powerful moment as the story begins, as we meet this character, is she shouts out, I volunteer to be tribute. And this is not normally done. People don't volunteer to participate in something so terrible. And she was a figure that was a skilled hunter where her sister was not. So it's not that she saw this game as a place to earn or achieve or to get honor. She saw it as so awful that she hated it. She did not want to play the game, but she loved her sister. And so that was the choice. It's not that I want to play this game, but I want to protect my sister. And yet as she goes forward, the government official, the person leading, says this is remarkable that somebody was enthusiastic enough to volunteer, what's your name? And when she says her name, her last name betrays that was her sister. And so she says, oh, Primrose is your sister. Well, what honor, what glory you're showing by stepping forward. Everyone give a round of applause. And then she writes, nobody did, because nobody wanted to dignify this corrupt thing. We are not going to pretend that we are for this. We are not going to say this is okay. But then she says, but there's a sign in our culture where people take their fingers, put them to their lips, and raise them. And instead of clapping, they did that. And it was a recognition, this whole system is corrupt, but she did something within that stands out. She didn't love the game, she loved her sister. And when we think of the Easter story, because God has the power of life, it's easy to think it was no big thing for Jesus just to come, just to show us that death has no power. Okay, I'm going to go, and then I'm going to come out on the other side, and now you're going to understand. It's not that death is no big deal. Death is a terribly big deal because everyone is on the path towards it, and it's mysterious in its darkness, and it's not the way it should be. But Jesus comes not because he loves death, but because he loves his people. And so for his people, he goes and is that tribute. He is the one who ransoms his life when nobody else can ransom anything for one another. There's no wealth, there's no achievement, there's nothing you can do to get yourself out of it, no less anyone else. But we're told that Jesus is the only one who has the power to give life. He's the one who came, he literally gives his life, which is why Easter is such a time of celebration for us, where we recognize we hate death, we hate the misery of this world, but we love the one who came and suffered with us so that we would be with him in his life. And so this is a day for rejoicing, a day to recognize that we've been given a different possibility, a different paradigm. And so the next question is, what are you attaining? So where are you going? Well, you're going a variety of ways. We're a group of diverse people, but we're all going towards the grave. But who can you count on? And what we're told is you can count on the Good Shepherd. Jesus has been sent and he's going to lead us. And he's not going to lead us away from death, but he's going to lead us through it so it's not the end. So what are you attaining with your life along the way? And a word that's in the Bible a lot that certainly fits the context of worship, but it's out there in culture, is the word glory. People want glory. There's something about us that the darkness of death, we don't even want to think about it. We don't understand it. We're afraid of it. But we want what's good, what gives us life. And so maybe money is the best that we could do. Maybe achievements are the best things we could do. Maybe the applause of people is the best we can do. And so we want the best there is. Psalm 49 is giving us wisdom to saying there's something better than fame and fortune. And if you're trusting in that, you are losing out on what is truly glorious. And so the picture of those who have trusted in wealth, that have trusted in fame, verse 11, their graves are their home forever. Verse 14, their form shall be consumed in Sheol. You're no longer recognizable. You hoped in something that now does nothing for you, and that's it. Verse 17, and here's the wisdom perspective. His glory will not go down with him. And this is where Psalm 49 is showing a more sophisticated way of thinking. He's not simply saying, look, money bad, religion good, don't do money, do religion. He's saying, look, we don't really understand this world, and so we're trying to do the best that we can, but we're running after what everybody is running after, and everyone's being shepherded by death. And so could we understand what's really of value? The picture here is not an argument to say wealth and achievements play no purpose. It's saying wealth and achievements play an important purpose. They're good to strive after, but here's the thing is, they're more enduring than you are. So why are you hoping in them? His glory will not go down with him when he goes to the grave. So you've amassed a fortune, and yes, the fortune will outlive you. It will do nothing for you, but here's the foolish reality is you will be separated from all of the things that you've attained. And so the wise perspective is actually, if you've really achieved a lot, your achievements are more valuable than you. So the achievements will go on. Did you build a hospital? Wonderful. That hospital could serve a generation, but you're done. And the problem is in our grasp for immortality, we think, but if I only get 50 years, 70, 100, whatever our life expectancy could be, but if I can amass a fortune for my descendants or for the nonprofits, or if I could have things built, if I could leave a company behind, well, then my name will live on. And the psalm is affirming, yeah, your name will live on and the money might live on, not eternally, because within 100 years, some fool is going to make some choices about your assets. They're not going to matter to them like you did, and eventually they'll be gone. Or that building that was built with your name on it, the new wealthy donor is going to do an architectural twist that involves a plaque being put over your name with that person's name. And so sure, what we do on earth endures, not forever, but it's still valuable. It's still valuable, but here's the thing. If that's what your glory is, you will be separated from it. The Bible presents a glory that is in a person, and we're told that glory you will never be separated from. And this is why that's where we put our trust. When the grave comes, we are as firmly joined with the Good Shepherd as we ever were, whereas we will not be firmly joined with our wealth or our achievements. And so it raises the question, where do you then put your trust? Wealth and achievements are fine. Live life with whatever energy and wisdom and skills you have, and whatever you do may continue on to make the earth a good place. but you will be separated from those things, or you could join with something more eternal. And that's what actually gives us the kind of wisdom to then live well, to make a difference here. Verse 11, they called lands by their own names. Um, that's what we're looking for, something that endures. We're looking for something more than just the few years that we get. Psalm 49 reminds us that the land that has your name has it until somebody who's just like you amasses an army, goes and conquers it, and then changes the name. So don't tie yourself to a thing that will do nothing for you. Tie yourself to the living shepherd who will not forsake you. And so when we think of glory, the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible, gives a picture of what is it like for those who follow the Good Shepherd. And it's a picture of the world with all of its current difficulties and how things will intensify at times, but it's also a story that those who are hoping with a right hope, those who have gained wisdom, will have actually a glory, a joy that endures. And so along the way in Revelation 7, in the midst of all of this misery, there are people that have been suffering. And I'm going to read probably 5 or 6 sentences from Revelation 7. Verse 13, it says, one of the elders addressed me, saying, who are these clothed in white robes, and from where have they come? So it's a rhetorical question. John, who writes this, doesn't know. He explains that these are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. And therefore they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. So there's that language of Psalm 23. God is present with them. They will hunger no more. They will not thirst anymore. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb in the midst of the throne will be their shepherd. And he will guide them to springs of living water. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. So the picture is the water is not flowing from us in our misery, but it's flowing to us to quench us. Why? Because the shepherd became the lamb. And it's this picture in eternity that what Jesus did here on earth matters in an eternal way, that he's still a lamb who is slain. He became one of us to go before us into death. But the one who became the lamb is the shepherd. He will guide us to springs of living water. Psalm 23 is realized when Jesus himself, the good shepherd, comes. And so in verse 14, the path of the foolish as they go to Sheol, their accomplishments remain for a time, but the upright shall rule over them in the morning. And that's the wise call to be like, before you fear missing out, you jump into the wrong thing. What are you running after? Who's leading you? What are you really doing with your life? And this sounds very much like Jesus in Matthew 5, who says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the poor in spirit. He's saying there are times that the world is wisely ordered, and those who are upright and wise and hardworking thrive. And there are times when people so love the attainment of things that will turn against one another, that if you're seeking to live an upright life, you will feel like you're cursed, that you are living unwisely. But Jesus says, but blessed are those who will still remain upright, who will still trust in me rather than in wealth, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Verse 14, the upright shall rule over the arrogant, the foolish in the morning. After the time of darkness, there's a time of light. And that's when we will see whether or not we've lived wisely. And so the picture that we're given here gives us a more sophisticated way of approaching life with its complexities. There's sort of the secular atheist way that says death is just the end, that's it. And so enjoy yourself if that's what you value. Try to achieve something if that's you just make most of it. Be courageous. Don't fear. Why? Because fear would waste your time. That's the existential approach. It's meaningless. Just embrace it. Make the most of it. Because of that, the religious response is often escapist, where we say, it's like being at a bus station. You're just here waiting for the future. And what should you do while you're waiting? It doesn't matter. Read a newspaper, eat a candy bar, take a nap, pace in a circle. When the bus comes, you get on the bus and that's it. And so what are we doing in life? We're just existing until we're received by God. That's not entirely wrong, but it's not wise. It doesn't tell us how to live well. The Christian story, Easter, is not Jesus appearing as a ghost and saying, I went first, so don't fear death. Now here's my last tip, be courageous. And then we're going to face death and then go up as disembodied human beings to sort of what we imagine as some place where we no longer have wealth or achievements or accomplishments. Instead, Jesus appears with a body, and he sits down and eats with his disciples, and then he tells them, I'm not taking you out of here yet. God still has things for you to do. And so for each of you, it may be different, but faithfully wait on the Lord. And when your time comes, he'll receive you. But so long as you're here, hope in him and live wisely. And it's that hope that actually creates the possibility that we can live in this world. And if we're wise and good and successful, we can enjoy the fruit of it. And if we make some bad choices and we're not, our lives are not meaningless. If the world goes through a period of intense corruption, we'll have to endure it. But there's still reasons for us to remain. And so I want to end with just a number of ways that the resurrection of Jesus can help us to be wise, to live in this world. One is just a reminder not to live ruled by fear. That's part of the riddle. Why should I be afraid? And so the answer is not Christianity will take your feelings of fear away, whereas fear, they're feelings that indicate something's wrong. You're just alerted to the fact that there's danger, so think carefully before you act. Christians, along with everyone else, still experience fear. What we're told is, why should fear dominate, keep us from doing the right thing? Whereas if the Lord is our shepherd, if he guides us, if he'll watch over us, if he will receive us, even if everything fails, yeah, you're still going to be afraid if you're a human being. But you don't need to be averse to all risk, because if God is with you, don't do anything dumb, but don't not do anything important. Fear should not be dominating people who believe in the resurrection. Here's the second thing: you can have joy now. The fact that Jesus came back in time, it's not just sacrifice everything for some future payoff, but his life has come into the world, so right now you have hope. And it's a hope that's mixed in with our fear and our continued misunderstandings and the difficulties of this life, but it's a real hope. So you should expect, if God has given you life, to have something to rejoice in. And so if Jesus Christ has been raised, you can have joy as part of your life. Third thing, assurance of our value. We're running after money and achievements because we want to prove that we have a reason to exist. And the psalm is warning us, you can't ransom your life. People are not going to be as impressed. All things do not depend on who you are and what you can do, but all things depend on who you are doing life with. And therefore, if you've heard the call of Christ and if you've answered, your value is not what you will achieve for him, but your value is in the fact that he loved you. And then that frees you up. What are the things you can do? If you could achieve great things for God, go do it. But not because you need to earn it or prove yourself, but because the living God has left you on the earth to do something. What is the best thing you can do? Do it joyfully. The last thing I'll say is that to live wisely, this Christian belief in the resurrection is not an escape. We're able to face the world. What are the good things that if we wisely do them will cause the world to flourish? What are the terrible things that we need to watch out for, resist, or occasionally stand up against? When you think of Christians that have hoped firmly in the future realm, they have typically invested very well in the present realm. And this is where Jesus changes our relationship. He says, don't store up treasures on earth where moth and rust can destroy, where thieves break in and steal. He's not saying that wealth has no value here. He's saying the world will go on for a season, but don't hope in what cannot deliver you. Hope in me. And then if you're living wisely and you're doing good within the world, well, God may bless that. So when you look at the kinds of institutions Christians have started, hospitals, for example, we care for the sick. Yeah, we're all going to die, but if we could help somebody live longer and live better, we're committed to that. So look at the hospitals in the city, Columbia Presbyterian, St. Luke's. It's religious people who have believed that there's more than this world, who had a conviction, but we need to care for the people in the world. You think of educational institutions, the Christian tradition of saying we want wisdom. How do we create places that will have such an understanding of God, his ways, and his word that we think through everything? And so the elite schools of the United States, the Ivy League schools, all began as training grounds to pass on that kind of wisdom. So Columbia University, where did it begin? It began meeting in Trinity Church downtown. It was a ministry of the church until they moved around a bit, and then they bought this campus, and the first building they built, Low Library, they architecturally shaped as a Greek cross. And they put outside on it for the advancement of good and for the glory of the Almighty God. And that's what we're starting. We're starting an institution to say, if we can have the wisdom of God, if we can live well, why don't we think through everything and serve the world in a comprehensive way? And so maybe over time, the institutions lose those foundational commitments. But those of us in this generation have to say, well, what is it we're doing? If the resurrection is real, this world is not all there is, but this world is where we are now. And so what does it look like to live faithful lives? And some people from our church I thought of as I was thinking this week, a family that hasn't been here for probably more than 10 years. But I think most people that got to know them would say they were wise. What do I mean by that? They were very kind people. They were very nice. Most people liked them. They were very generous. They had a very strong faith. They were very committed. They served our church very well, but they were involved in lots of things. They were pretty accomplished in terms of resume kind of things, top schools. That was their story, and they lived well. And then they were traveling, and they somehow, and I don't remember the details, but came across a newborn child with serious medical defects. So the parents left the child, and they found this child and felt a certain responsibility to do something. But they were in a foreign country, and so they didn't know how to navigate the systems, went to a hospital where they were told, we are not equipped to deal with this. You're going to need to go to the city hospital. Well, they are not citizens. They don't have any papers for this human being. What do you do? And they grappled so long as they were there. They came up with a temporary plan. They came back to New York, and then they packed up everything, and they moved there. And they dedicated the next few years to seeing this young girl through the process until they could adopt her. But because they were forced to figure out the system and how it was not working, they decided to stay so that they could help other children and families who didn't know how to navigate the systems. And they remained, having given everything up here to go there. So how do you explain that? Is it that the things of this world don't matter? No, they had quite a nice big home. They were doing well. One of them particularly loved the job that they had. But something compelled them that there was something more important. So these things are good, but there's something now that means that we should choose differently. And so it's not that they did the right thing. It's not that any of us would be expected to do that, but they followed the shepherd. They believed that was faithful. And so on the one hand, this world is not all that there is, that they were able to give up everything, their prosperity, and go. But on the other hand, they went in order to save a life in this world and to invest in the place that they were. Could you imagine New York City was filled with people like that? Would you be afraid to get on the subway? Or if you were home and lonely, would you think, I better go on the subway so somebody there can help me? People don't live wisely. We're not questioning what we should really do. We're just involved in this weird game that we're filling our time and energies doing nothing until we die. Not nothing, but the resurrection shows us that actually you're a lot freer than you think. Death is not as mysterious. It's not as permanent. And God will watch over you. And if Christ is your shepherd, he will be with you. That doesn't mean it'll be easy, but it means you will endure it. It means the grave is not the end. So then what can you do now? If things are going well, how could you rejoice? How could you be generous? If things are not, what does it look like to be faithful and to fight the good fight? The resurrection of Jesus makes us wise. It gives us a view of the world to say, I can now hope in something that will ready me for whatever I face. And so there's more to this world than just passing the time until I'm done. But there's actually something profoundly significant about it. And so how can you follow the Good Shepherd as you try to live wisely? Think about how the resurrection of Jesus can make you wise. Let me pray for us. Our Father, we come here with such limited understanding. Some of us have been Christians for so long. Some of us know nothing about the Bible. And yet there's so much to learn. And we thank you that you are a patient, faithful teacher, that you make your ways known, that you teach us, you instruct us, you endure with us, and you help us where we make foolish choices. And thank you that you're with us, even where we suffer the consequences of our choices or the choices of others. Lord, thank you for Jesus, who faced death on our behalf and who was raised to new life so that we are not alone in our death, but also we will not be alone after death. We will be with the Lamb who is slain, who is now our shepherd, who leads us to still waters. And so, Lord, by your Spirit, make us wise today as we think on these things. We pray in his name. Amen.